I Love Black People read, which are our co-founder Sinclair Skinner was talking more on the plans for this year and what we are going to speak about. And also our co-founders are currently in Africa. Sinclair Skinner is in South Africa. You'll be in Harare tomorrow. So those who are in Harare, you're always free to come to the office to ask more and engage, help us with the work which we are doing again. And also, I'd like to thank all the speakers who have joined the meeting. Thank you, I appreciate you. My brother Amis in Prestepeka, all the way from Malawi, welcome you, brother. And also to each and every one of you, we appreciate your love and support. And also the good news is that we launched the Green Book. Maybe we have Yvonne to speak about the Green Book and how to assess it for just 5 minutes after our speakers again. And also after the country speakers, we're going to have the healthcare lecture with Nana Akua, then finally the Pan-African History and Organizing class with Dr. Taryn Wright. So that's the lineup for today. And before we start, I'm going to pray and I'm going to use my own my own language, which we largely spoke here, indigenous language, which is Shona. So I'm just going to do a quick prayer. Then we start having our brother, amazing Grace Tepeka from Malawi to speak. So let us all pray. Katinamate tenzi mwababa tukutenda ini chipo chopenja mnoti pasifaniswa. Gaba mbili peti karushenyi mwari demu gatunga mirira. Yesu mwari tatanga msangano hunu. Demu ita zvisizwa chataronga zhugwa zvinofamba zvakanaka. Namatira wese ari kunyika dzakasiyana-siyana mwari baba dai mungavatungamirira zvishuurwawo ndimi munozviziva zvese ngazvive zvinofamba nembiri yenyu ndanamata zvese tenzisa nembiri iyo yenyu kusingaperi. Amen. Yes, so our brother amazing Grace Tepeka all the way from Malawi. Greetings, brother. You can introduce yourself and also let us know the report which you have today.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. I'm from Malawi, amazing Grace Tepeka. I'm proud to be a Pan-African, and I'm proud to present on the effects of post-slave trade in Africa. Yeah, so it's very important that we should know our history. And I believe by the end of this presentation, we're gonna learn a lot. And I believe you will be open to ask any question that you have. Can I proceed?
Yes, you can proceed. Thank you.
All right. I have sent you the PDF. I think you have seen it.
Yes.
Yeah. So, where should I start?
You can start from the top. Yeah.
All right. As Africans, we have to be proud of who we are. And we have to know we have rights. We are human beings. We are not supposed to be treated like animals anywhere we are. And we're proud of this organization because the product of this will be us being looked at as equal everywhere we go across the world. So, on this topic, of course, my slide is taking time to open. Just give me a minute. But I will just introduce the topic. Like slave trade started 400 years ago in Africa by the Europeans. The aim was to fish labor from Africa. So they couldn't work on themselves. What they wanted was to take our energy and force us into work, to work in their countries. Among the slave trade acts, it's everywhere if we read our history that the transatlantic slave trade is the biggest, it's the one which was so devastating, and it is termed by many Africans and African Americans as a Holocaust, because our ancestors faced a lot of torture and the disrespectful treatments by the whites. Over 15 million people, African people, men and women and children, were taken into slave trade during this period. And it's everywhere that on their way to the European countries, mostly England, Portugal, America, so many evil things were happening to us. And this used to happen because the whites, I think they thought we lack knowledge. We lack knowledge. So during this period, we lost so many African lives to this torture during this period. And during this period, we lost our resources because the whites, when they come here, they could not only exploit human labor or slaves, they used to take our resources, robbing Africa of its minerals, robbing Africa of its life, robbing Africa of its people. And the most devastating thing, if we do the research, is that fellow Africans, the traditional leaders, they were selling these slaves. They could sell fellow humans, fellow black people to the whites in exchange of cheap things like ranging from bag of sugar, exchanging for a human being. So this kind of life, this kind of treatment that we suffered under these whites is the reason why we are here. They may want us to forget our history, forget this tragedy, but we cannot forget it. That's why there is this kind of organization, the Pan-African organization, which is the custodians, the keepers of our history, of where we are coming from. This kind of effects, this kind of treatment, the slave trade, more especially the transatlantic slave trade, left impacts, left scars on African soil. Some of them which are affecting even us who were not present by then, but we have inherited these effects to the present time that we're even failing. We're even failing to identify who we are. Let alone that you have this organization now that so many Africans, so many people will be enlightened on this one. So just to mention a few, they're ranging from political, cultural, economic, as well as heavy impacts, as well as heavy impacts. On political impacts that the slave trade left in us, that Africa, if we look across all the nations, we can see that we are not ourselves. The politics we are practicing is a system that is instilled in us by the whites. More especially, I dislike the democracy part, because I believe democracy found us in a time when we are not ready for it. But the whites saw it as a weapon to deprive us of our way of governance, our way of political endeavors. As a result, we are ending ourselves, like my own country, Malawi. We welcomed democracy in 1994. Okay, 1994, welcomed democracy. Kamusbanda liberated us in 1964, you know, and up to now, my country, I cannot identify what kind of politics do we have. We have reached an extent of terming it as a data game. When you look at those countries where democracy is not, it's not the way or their way of politics, you can see that they're doing great politically, economically. We're talking about the Libyans. We're talking about Egypt before it was civilized some few years ago by these whites. So politically, it left a lot of scars, the slave trade. To talk about culture, these whites, when they come, they could grab the land and stay forcibly in those lands, thereby influencing our traditional leaders into their wish, into their desires, their plans. For example, they could exchange their leadership with these whites. In exchange, they could become the master. The whites themselves become the masters to our leaders. If we lead the history, if we lead the literature, they became the master. They impose themselves on our traditional leaders. And in this particular case, changing the way of dressing, the language. You see, in Malawi, when you speak Chichewa, you don't speak English, you are termed as someone who is uneducated. We have seen so many countries like Mozambique, they speak Portuguese. You see Senegal and the other countries, they speaking French, the foreign language. So Africa, a disjointed nation, as we speak now in different languages. We fail to understand each other in everything. We go to African Union, we go to all these African organizations, but out there it's nothing. So in this way, the culture changed. The way we are dressing, it's not the way we used to dress. In Malawi, we used to dress, but now you see the dressing, which is leading to so many problems, moral decay. All these are influence of slave trade. These are of the whites. On economic level, one can understand that Africa is termed as the poorest continent in the world, in the universe. We allowed them to take the labor force. We allowed them to take our minerals. As a result, we could not farm. Africa is a green belt. Africa depends on agriculture. But because of this slave trade, weak men, old men, when we are left as a result, this slave trade, most of the transatlantic slave trade led to development of most.
Yes, brother Amazing Grace. I think you are out of time.
How many times?
I think you only have a minute to wrap up. Then maybe if you didn't finish it, you can always have you present next time.
All right. So these problems, as I've mentioned, the political problems and the cultural problems and the economic problems, they are all effects of transatlantic slave trade. The good thing that we have to do now is to realize who we are, repositioning ourselves to see where we missed it. From there, we can move forward as Africa, as a United States of Africa. And I believe we can change the system, and I believe we can transform our way of thinking and become a better continent. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Brother Amazing Grace, all the way from Malawi, the land of love. We appreciate you, brother. And also, we really enjoyed the teachings, and we're learning new things each and every day. That's the reason why we're here. I can say, Bonga requested for the presentation. I'll send it to the groups, Peter, so that you can have our presentation from Amazing Grace. So on next, we're going to go all the way to Namibia, where our ambassador, Sister Natalia Faith Kandara, is to give us a speech. Hope you are ready, Sister Natalia. You can unmute yourself. Yes, Yvonne, you can unmute Sister Natalia.
Yes, she can unmute herself.
All right, Natalia, you can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Compliment of the new year to everyone. I think Anna is presenting on my behalf.
Okay.
A bit late preparation. Yes, please. If Anna is around, I don't mind.
All right. All right. Maybe if she's not around, when she joins, then we have a present on her behalf. All right, Sister Natalia.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Again, that was Sister Natalia. I think Anna, I was going to present on her behalf, but I suppose I can't see her on this meeting. So without wasting time, whilst we're waiting for her, we're going to have our brother all the way from Nigeria, the Ambassador Ifesinachi Uroko, to present. Yes, brother Ifesinachi, welcome.
Yes. Greetings, Award. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Again, when you're done presenting, I need you to just go through the chat room and also answer the questions which were being asked by our brother Abuga as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope the new year is going well. Okay.
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are participating from. I want to first and foremost make a recommendation of this Global Green Book, which is a platform that I Love Black people have modernized or extended, because it have been in existence before, but they have done a great job, a great work on that book, which is a safety book. It's a survival guide for Black people across the globe. So I recommend it to our brothers from African continent traveling outside Africa, because I think I'm considering it to be a very great tool for them that is going to new environment. They will see recommendations of Black-friendly business places, business social centers, anything you think of, you can get it in that book. So I want to start by giving a quick update on what is happening in Nigeria. As you know, Nigerians will be exercising their political franchise on 25th February this year. So we'll have three major contestants. We'll have major two political parties that have been in existence. The current ruling party, which is APC, which is the flag bearer, Asiwaju Ahmed Bola Ahmed Asiwaju Tinubu, with PDP, which is the largest political party in Africa, which is the flag bearer Atiku Abubakar, and with an emerging force whom contested under PDP in the previous election, but defected to Labour Party, and he's currently gaining the support of the common masses because he's giving us promise of a new change. He said he wants to turn Nigeria from consumption nation to production nation. So the youths are giving him maximum support, while the two old political parties are gaining maximum support from the political elites. So this guy is like, he's just standing alone, gaining the support of the youth. And me personally, I will give him my vote, not because he's going to turn Nigeria around, but because he's more vibrant and more promising than the old political orders that have kept Nigeria where Nigeria is today. Why I say he's not going to change Nigeria is because of the problem, because none of them is really discussing the problem of Nigeria. And this is now in alignment with the topic of discussion today, which is a slave trade. Because the problem we have as Nigerians today, not only Nigerians, but as Black people, is the effects of colonialization and slave trade. You see? Because these leaders will say they are bad leaders, they are not doing well, that they are our problem. I don't think if they are our problem. Our problem is actually our society. You see, the African society today is a photocopy of the Western society. It is not a society based on the foundations of Africanness, based on the ethics and norms of the African people. Because we as Africans have lost our identity as a result of colonization and slave trade. So none of the political contestants is discussing or talking of how are we going to re-engineer our society so that we can produce better human beings. It is not the politicians alone that are evil. I bet you most people in Africa are corrupt. It's just that they don't have the opportunity. And this is as a result of the society that we have. So going forward, my brother asked a question if Africans were civilized or not before the coming of the white man. I will tell you, yes, my brother, Africans, they were civilized. But you know, in the nature of life, everything takes time to grow. This is applicable to every life that you see in the surface of the planet, the plants, the animals, the human beings. If they born you as a child, you take time to grow, to accumulate based on what you eat, based on the environment, what you eat, what you see, what you hear. That's what grows you, both your spiritual growth, your physical growth, mental growth. Now, Africans, they were growing in their own pace. Yes, because even the white men, the white men that came, that you see, you people see them as the most civilized people. In them too came to the world as naked human beings. They did not appear and saw everything. The skyscrapers they have today, the fast train, the speed train they have today, the jets they have today, it did not appear to them. It was based on challenges, you see. So it is challenges that brings about invention. And Africans were inventing things based on the challenges they were facing at that time, at that moment in time. So they were growing and getting civilized in their own way. They had their own system of healing their people. They had their own system of communication. They had their own system of market trading. They had their own system of religion. They had their own system of ruling and leadership in the society. All these things were in place before the white men came. So the coming of the white men did not do us a greater good than had it been they did not come. Had it been they did not come, we would have maintained our identity and grow and nurture our culture and tradition based on our identity. We have identity just the way they have identity. The Indians have identity, the Chinese have identity. All these people, all this race, let me say the 7 continents, which is being referred to as the 7 churches in the Bible, have different identities. But you see, these guys came, and the effect is that they stampeded our own natural civilization, natural growth. You see? So slave trade and colonization did us more harm than good. Besides, I'm not seeing any of the good anyway, rather than them constructing roads that leads to where they were mining or where they have plantations, then having pipe water in their own. You see, not for the betterment of the common people, the native that owns the community or the society.
Yes,
so I have a lot to say, bro, but see, there is no time. Time is this. Let me round up before I finish. So let me stop here anyway. I am because you are. I urge everybody to support the movement. I believe the grace of our people have started to awaken. We'll raise leaders to bring the required change that we need. I am because you are. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Okay, thank you very much, Ifsnashi. It was our brother from Nigeria. Without wasting time, we're going to have the healthcare lecture with Nana Akua. Mr. Nakwa can unmute yourself, and if you want to get a shout out from her, you can turn on your camera.
Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, look, so y'all can't see my screen, but the first two rows, everybody's face is showing. So that's wonderful. So I can't really see Anna's face, but I see the cameras on, and Bala Musa and Ifa Sanache. I caught a little bit of what you were saying. Greetings to you. Topeka, Natalia, Akakpo, Gilbert, I'm hopefully not messing y'all's names up, and Clyde, and hey, and Ward, how y'all doing? And Michael, Adam Bila. Oh, did I already greet you? Oh, similar names. Kakpo and Akipe. Okay, there's two of y'all that's got similar names there. I wonder if y'all are from the same place. So anywho, I am glad to see you all and all of the other black boxes. Greetings to you all as well. So I see a lot of names, but not a lot of faces, but greetings everyone. This is our last lesson for this session. So this is considered week 8. And so we spoke about cleansing and detoxification last week, and sort of part 2 is this week. But we'll specifically talk about hypertension and diabetes, a couple of other things, maybe just some wellness information in general I'll go into. I think this would probably be a good time if you have questions. I think this would be a great session to go through that. But I plan to just sort of share some information of, maybe some things you can consider if you are trying to improve your condition, if you're dealing with hypertension or diabetes. This is something I think that culturally throughout the diaspora that Black people deal with. I think it has to do with more so lifestyle and diet. I don't know that these are necessarily hereditary things. We have these different conditions that run in families, but I think it's more so because of how we live and how we eat. So I really just want to encourage you to consider or reconsider how you eat or what you eat, and maybe what things to add into your diet, into your routine to improve these conditions. So in terms of a recap, let's just talk a little bit. We discussed the importance of cleansing, purging, cleansing the body of toxins, impurities, or even neutralizing the effects of any kind of toxins that come into the body. We talked about the paths of elimination last week, where we discussed herbs that heal and cleanse the lungs, the skin, the colon, the kidneys, and the liver. And so a slight extension of that is just also knowing which conditions maybe to address or what organs to address if you have different conditions. So we know that if we are trying to figure what area to address in a cleansing, we know that if, for example, we have eczema or any form of dermatitis, psoriasis, if we have acne, even if we have skin rashes, boils, cysts, any complexion issues, we know that that's directly dealing with the skin. And so all of the herbs that we talked about in terms of the skin, we know that we would address those things or add those things into our diet when addressing skin issues. We know that if we drink a lot, or we use either recreational drugs or a lot of pharmaceutical prescription drugs, or if we have certain chronic illnesses, we know that we would need to address the liver. And we know that the same herbs and some of the same protocols for cleansing the liver will also impact the skin, because anything that heals the skin will also benefit the liver, because we're all talking about blood cleansing and purifying the blood. We know that if we have asthma or we have chronic respiratory issues like bronchitis or sinus infections, things of that nature, if we work outside in a toxic environment, we have breathing difficulties or things going on with our lungs, we know specifically that we would address strengthening the lungs, cleansing the lungs. Even if we don't have any specific issue, we know that breath is life. We know that it's important to cleanse our lungs. If we have high blood pressure or trouble regulating our blood pressure, if we have fluid retention, if we have any changes or issues in how we urinate, the consistency of the urination, the color of the urine, and other things, we know that we have to address the kidneys, right? If we have chronic bladder infections or urinary tract infections, then the kidneys is what we would maybe start with and focus on. And then, of course, if we have Crohn's disease or colitis or diverticulitis, or any colon issues, we are constipated frequently, or we suffer from diarrhea consistently, we know that we have to do things to address the colon. So these are just certain conditions related to those steps of elimination that we talked about last week. So I just wanted to say that as a recap. And I see that they're posting about the book. Have we talked about the book already? But please, if not, let me say a little word, because a lot of this information is in the Global Green Book, this 2022 edition, right? We encourage you to share the link that was just posted in the chat. We encourage you to share it with your friends, your family, your colleagues, and really promote the book. Continue to share about the app, continue to share about the book. It has a lot of good information. We are still on the healthcare edition, so a lot of the information that we cover here and additional information that I maybe haven't had the opportunity to share as part of the class. There's a lot of good information to have this as a resource. In addition to all of the great travel information in terms of who to use for different services, healing services in the different parts of the world, it also has a chapter on health and healing, the different types of holistic healing, has a chart about herbs, it has a chart about homeopathic remedies, it even has some of the sort of, we'll say, Western types of information on healing, where it gives you the signs of a stroke, signs of a heart attack, different symptoms of diabetes, symptoms of hypertension, symptoms of poisoning or toxicity, and what to do about those things. So it's a really good tool. Please share the link in your social media groups with family and friends. Purchase the book if you can. If not the paperback, then the ebook, where you can use it. What's the right word? Virtually or electronically. And so we'll have more information about that, but we also have highlighted, and I think a lot of you maybe contributed to some of the African universities. So there is a page for all of the referred or recommended African universities in the book. There's a list of all of the historically Black colleges and universities in the book. I encourage you to familiarize yourself with these different schools in the different states here in the US, or even some of the universities in either your country or other countries in Africa, because these are all excellent, you know, not just the tourist things that you may do when you go to a particular place, but our institutions of higher learning that really educate Black people. We want to support them, and we want to spread the word about these places and increase the tourism to Black and African universities. So that's a piece that we have in the book as well, because we're always focused on keeping Black and African people safe. We have a section on what to do if you come in contact with the police, you know, knowing your rights, how to protect yourself from harm, if you happen to travel or be in an area, or if it comes to you at your front door, things that you can do to protect yourself and to stay safe. So the book is very comprehensive. We always try to add, you know, good quality information that can save our lives, because that's what it's about. We want Black people to be safe in all of our different settings and wherever we travel, and different things that we're interested in and places that we go. We want to be sure that we are armed with the tools and the information to make it back home safely, you know, and to be in the best condition, you know, even better than where we started. We want to be always in a better condition or better position than we are currently in. So please visit the link, get some information, share it. Yeah. I wish I could speak tree. I wish I could speak Ga. I was married to Ga. Language is not my strong suit. So yeah, I hear you. I happen to have seen, I missed some of the messages that come through while I'm teaching, but yeah, good luck with that one. I can give you a simple greeting, but not much conversation in any other language. And I've been traveling to Ghana for 22 years. Yeah, and I get criticized for it, believe me. I'm a queen mother in an area in the Fanti region where they speak Fanti. And of course, one of the elders was like, "She don't know how to speak Fanti." Yeah, well, that's just what it is. And I've often talked about how smart you all are that know multiple languages. Like, if you can listen to me and understand what I'm saying, I respect you greatly, because yes, knowing different languages is a wonderful thing. It's just not a gift that I have. So let's move on about the topic. Let me see. I tried pulling up the lesson. Oh, it's there. It's not always there, but I did well today. Very good. And so I think the first part of this lesson, we're going to talk about a personal care plan. So here we've had 7 weeks, now this being the 8th, where we've talked about different information on what health options we have, what things we can use when we are faced with different health challenges. This form here talks about putting sort of all of that together, already with what you know and what you use, but maybe some new information that you've been introduced to. But what we know is that when we are not well, and I generally don't use the word sick, right? I always just say when you're not feeling well. But when you're not feeling well, you're not at your best. You're not mentally sharp. You're not physically able maybe to do everything you would normally do. This plan is something I created some years ago. As a mother, as a healer, as a care provider, you know, in my different settings and my different roles in life, I'm often faced with having to assist people. And it becomes challenging, even as a well-learned or well-educated person, on healing. When you're in a stressful situation, when illness is right in front of you, it's not always easy to draw the information and quickly access what it is you should do for the person, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for someone else. It's not always easy to think and remember all of those things. So this plan here is something I encourage you to kind of have printed out if you can, and have reviewed it and kind of filled it in for yourself. If you suffer from a chronic condition where you know you'll have another flare up or outbreak of a condition, if you're asthmatic, if you are diabetic, if you have fibromyalgia or arthritis or any condition that you know you will have challenging times with, right? This chart kind of helps you pinpoint what it is you would do in those instances. And you can do the same with your children or anyone that you're caring for, your parents or grandparents or seniors. If you know that a child typically will get a tummy ache or have a fever, or whatever the case may be. If someone suffers from allergies, sinuses, things that we know reoccur, this is just something easy to have jotted down what it is you do. What is it that I eat? What is it that I drink? And all of these, of course, are around what helps you feel better. So this is your wellness plan. This is your care, your personal care plan. And of course, if you're doing it for someone you're taking care of, you base it on what they need. What do they normally prefer to eat when they're sick? If the child has a toothache, do they like the fruit popsicles? You know, it's cool, it's light, but it gives some hydration. It's not something they have to really chew on and really digest. Or it may be some soup, right? A light soup, or here in the States, people like chicken noodle soup, or these different types of soups that are just kind of easy, not about heavies or starches or things like that. Or it may just be some toast or crackers, whatever it is that you may eat that helps you feel better in that situation. What is it that you drink? You know, is it ginger ale? Is it tea? You know, is it water with lemon? You know, whatever it may be that may help bring some relaxation, some soothing, some healing to the body. It may be aloe vera juice. It could be any number of things that help you when you're not well. What supplementation do you take? What herbs? What other remedies? You know, is it a local, you know, plant that you usually use when you have some sort of tropical fever, or you have the symptoms of some sort of tropical fever? What is it that you should take that will help your body recover? And also, already knowing from your past experience, how is it that you usually feel emotionally? Like, are you usually really stressed? Do you get a sense of hopelessness? Or, you know, are you just sort of neutral? And then make account for how you need to handle that when that happens again. It may be the flower remedies that we've mentioned before. Someone may need to, to have on hand the rescue remedy, flower remedy, or the Star of Bethlehem, or the hornbeam or the elm, one of those flower remedies that help manage your stress and balance your emotions when you are not feeling well. What things you do to stay calm, breathing exercises, or nature sounds, or jazz music, you know, whatever sounds, smells, anything that helps create that healing environment for you. Write those things down. Who is it that you call to help you feel better? You know, who do you inform? Who do you need to have come over and assist you when you're not well, right? Who can be supportive? Do you like to talk? Do you not like to talk? Would you send a quick text to somebody and say, hey, I'm going through one of my flare-ups, check on me in a few hours? Or, hey, can you come and sit with me? Whatever it is that you know helps you to feel better, have that already written down and in place so that you know what to do. And then, of course, always know, especially if it is a reoccurring health condition, at what point do you need to call for help? Have someone come and assist you and take you to a clinic or an emergency room, or to schedule an appointment with your primary care provider. But have all of these things written out so that you don't have to struggle with, oh, what am I going to do? Or, oh, not again, or not another, you know, asthma attack. Oh, I'm feeling a panic attack. Come on. Whatever it may be, have your personal care plan written out so that you'll be prepared. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about blood pressure. So this chart, as I previously said, I always like this chart because it will tell you and get you familiar with what is a normal range, what is a high range or severely high range, what is a low range or severely low range. So I will encourage you to take note of what's considered normal and what's sort of borderline, and then what is sort of not great, but just only, you know, slightly elevated. Oh, not great, but only slightly lower than maybe it should be. So be familiar so that when you do go to the doctor, and a good, I think, healthcare provider will tell you. So a good nurse or a good certified nursing assistant or whoever is taking your vitals should really tell you all of your vital readings and signs that they are doing. A lot will not, but get into the habit of asking, okay, what was my blood pressure? Okay, is that normal, or how is that, or whatever. Now, that may not be the person to tell you. You may wait till you actually see the doctor or the nurse or what have you, but you'll at least now know for yourself, right? Because we know that anywhere around in this range, 120 over 70 or 120 over 80, these are all kind of normal ranges, and anywhere within this green area that you see here on this chart, right? And the closer you get to the 140 over 90, know that that's sort of borderline. This is when they would start kind of evaluating you a little closer, maybe having you come in a little more frequently, or they'll make note in your file to watch to see if it maintains at that borderline level. And then they would perhaps start talking about whether you should make dietary changes or lose weight or consider medication, things of that nature. They would probably also gauge that if you're having symptoms, headaches, things like that. So it's good for you to know if you are in sort of that normal range or if you are on that higher or borderline range. That's important. You always want to consider stress in your lifestyle if you are somewhere around that borderline hypertensive, level. And even the same, we talk a lot about high blood pressure, but of course, low blood pressure is an issue and can be a thing as well. So you would also want to know if you're too close to that 100 over 65, 100 over 60, 90 over 60, that range, because that also can present some challenges and be very bad as well. So, you may feel weak or tired or dizzy, or you might have fainting spells. These are all signs of where your blood pressure may be too low. So you want to evaluate this for yourself, even if the person you're seeing isn't alarmed. If you know that that's not your norm, you'll know for yourself to either ask more questions or to start making some lifestyle changes. And so some of those things may be some of the pieces of information that you see along this chart, right? So we know some of the more obvious things, right? We know to not eat foods that are high in salt, but we also would need to not do foods that are high in fats, right? We need to read labels. We need to make sure we're not doing foods that have hydrogenated oils or partially hydrogenated oils. We know that we don't want to do foods that have saturated fats and all of that. Usually these are your prepackaged foods, the things that you'll find on the interior of a store, right? Things that are on the shelf. They usually have added the hydrogenated oils to increase the shelf life so that things will last on the shelf longer. So of course, we know that we want fresh foods or foods that need some preservation, that need to maybe be in the refrigerator or the freezer or things that are fresh. These are going to be less likely to have these types of oils and salts and other preservatives in them. So we want to eat fresh. We want to eat clean, things that doesn't have a lot of additives. And even though this may not be directly related to high blood pressure, but if we're talking about reading labels, we also want to make sure we're not doing foods with food colors and other preservatives in them. Monosodium glutamate, which is MSG, which is a flavor enhancer. We know that colors and MSG and things like that, we know these are linked to cancer, and in some parts of the world are banned and not allowed in foods. So we want to keep a good accounting of what we're taking into our bodies, and we want to read the labels and be very clear on what we're putting into our bodies and how it can affect, our overall well-being. So we do want to include foods that have certain vitamins and minerals and things in them, right? So we know we want foods that have a lot of calcium and vitamin K in particular, right? So these would be foods like apples and avocados, bananas, broccoli, fish, grapes, oats, orange juice. And then, of course, water is always going to be on the list for every condition. But let me say something about the orange orange juice, right? So probably an actual orange is going to be a better option for you, because even though orange is a citrus and we think of more of a sour thing, but if you haven't noted, oranges or orange juice is very sweet. It's definitely a high calorie, high starchy, kind of really sweet juice. There's a reason, and we'll get into this a little bit when we start talking about diabetes, but there's a reason that people who are diabetic and their blood sugar drop, they'll drink orange juice, right? To kind of increase their blood sugar and kind of liven them up or pep them up, because this orange juice has so much sugar in it. So if you're watching your weight, if you're diabetic, these are the orange juice is not something you want to drink a lot of and overdo, but it is a good source of some vitamins and minerals, but not too much. Okay. We know that we want to include certain scents like CoQ10 and L-arginine, flaxseed oil, fish oil. These are all good supplementation to add. There are certainly foods that you can find some of these in. Some of our white fish or things like salmon, the more meatier fish will usually have. I'm not a big fan or a supporter of tilapia, so I really encourage you to get fish that's not farm raised and fish that has always been available and that we know the source of it. So, you know, if you live near a fishing town or that's the industry of your area, try to get fresh fish, not fish that has been grown in a pond, a man-made pond. We want fresh fish from the sea, from the ocean, right? We know that there are herbs, they've only listed 2 here, but there are many herbs that are good for regulating blood pressure. Hawthorn berry is one, garlic is another, but we also know that juniper berry is a good herb as well. Any of the herbs that are good for the kidneys are also going to have a good impact on your blood pressure. So these would be herbs like uva ursi or buchu, parsley, celery. These are good foods to add to your diet. If you suffer from high blood pressure, you probably can't eat enough celery. If it's not something you normally add to your diet, I would encourage you to do so. Parsley and others that I just can't think of. We talked about burdock and turmeric and yellow dock, and there's some others that we were just talking about last week. But those herbs that are kidney support herbs, these are all going to be impactful for regulating blood pressure as well. We also know that minerals like calcium and magnesium and potassium, these are going to be great supplements for regulating blood pressure, as well as the vitamins listed here, C, D, E, B complex, niacin, folic acid, all of these are great as well. And as I've mentioned, you know, you have to get enough sleep, you have to reduce your stress. Exercise is always going to be important. A lot of times healthcare professionals, if you are overweight, they are going to recommend that you reduce your weight. And probably more important is reducing your fat. What they standardly use here is the BMI. Not everyone subscribes to that per se, but you want to make sure that you are doing whatever you can to reduce the fat and excess weight in your body. You want to get into a routine where you're not having to drink a lot of caffeine or eat a lot of caffeine. You want low protein foods, low salt foods. If you smoke, we know that's not a good practice, not for your lungs, but also not for your heart. So these are all things that we can do when we're talking about regulating our blood pressure. We know that if we are doing stress relieving practices like baths and things like that, of course, while I love a good Epsom salt bath or a salt bath to relieve pain, that's not something that someone that's struggling with hypertension would do terms of too much salt, because we know that the skin absorbs, right, whatever we put in it and on it. And if we immerse ourselves into like a salt bath, that's not something we want to use as a regular practice if we are hypertensive. But whatever other stress relieving rituals that you can create, that is what we want to do. The other handouts here will just break down sort of the readings of the systolic and diastolic numbers. Again, I just thought this was helpful information for you to know and add to your toolkit, right? And so now let's talk about, and honestly, the best way I can talk about diabetes that I think is just very educational and empowers you is to just know how to eat. Now, of course, depending where you are with that, if you're on medication, continue that. But if you are borderline diabetic, or you're having some issues with having a high starch or a high glycemic diet, start making those dietary changes and adding in certain foods and supplementation. Chromium is going to be a really good mineral to add. Cinnamon is a good herb to add. And we know that treating the pancreas is going to be very important because we know that not only will diabetes affect the pancreas, but pancreatitis, pancreatic cancer, there are many other issues or concerns when you're talking about the pancreas, and that's one of the main organs that you want to also make sure that you are paying attention to if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic. But let's, for these purposes, talk specifically about the glycemic index. So basically any food that contains any kind of starch content that can elevate your blood sugar is listed on what they call the glycemic index. And so this is basically a chart that gives you the number, the reading of how quickly that food will elevate or spike your blood sugar. And why the pancreas is important here is because the foods that you eat that kind of spike your blood sugar, the pancreas then has to create enough insulin to help bring that back into balance, right? And so this is how you overwork your pancreas if you're eating really high starch, high glycemic foods. So this informational chart is just so that you know what foods contain all of these high glycemic foods. Any food that's over 70 is a food that you really want to watch out for. These are considered high carb foods. So we know that certain breads, certain grains, certain starchy vegetables like potatoes, carrots, beets, all of these things we know are high glycemic foods. You really want to be mindful of your choices in your grains and your breads. Well, bread is a grain, but your grains like your breads, your rices, your pastas, things of that nature, and really not overdo it. The other thing with Black people all over the world is that we love starches, our root vegetables, our staples, our, and there's different, oh gosh, there's a word and I can't think of it. But, these are sort of the base or the root of a lot of our diets because it's filling. Usually it's less expensive, right? And when you're trying to feed a family or support a family and create a good hearty meal, we will usually turn to these types of foods. But we have to be careful because these things can definitely create an imbalance in the body and create these health conditions that I just mentioned. So while that might be a cultural thing, it may even be a survival thing, we still really have to be careful if we're going to eat these, also exercising good portion control. Generally, the rule of thumb for different grains and pastas is what can fit in the palm of your hand. Usually we're talking about that here in the States as it relates to maybe pasta, but knowing that you may or may not be eating a lot of just spaghetti pasta, but it may be rice, or it may be African yam or something of that nature. It may be your banku or your fufu or your kinky. And I know that typically you're going to eat several balls of kinky or several balls of banku or what have you. And just be very mindful that your stress remains low, that your physical activity remains high, that you drink a lot of water, and that you're also getting vegetables and other minerals into the body to kind of offset that, because that really is sort of setting you up for other issues. And especially if you begin to gain some excess weight around the stomach area. So if around the abdomen, you're thick in the middle, or you have a protruding belly, these are all signs that you're eating too many starches and that you may be facing some health challenges with diabetes or some other issues with regulating how much sugar and carbs you're bringing into your body. So the chart here is really, I won't go over all of this, but it gives you an idea of what number is assigned to each of these foods. And it breaks down cereals. And I know in certain parts of the world, we eat a lot of these, and other parts, not at all. You may not have ever eaten cornflakes or, you know, whatever, but you may eat some type of porridge or these types of millage and things like that. So these are things also that you would, you know, not overdo, because these are grains that are in higher starch categories. Same thing with fruits. Our mangoes and our pineapples and the sweet fruits, these are things that can increase your blood sugar. So these are things that you still would do in moderation. And that's not to say that these are not fruits that are healthy for you, but again, we can't do a lot of these things in excess. Okay, so we still have to be mindful. Melons, things of that nature, even though they contain a lot of water, they still can increase your blood sugar. So you really want to just be mindful of what it is we're taking in and at what rate. What else can I say about that? So yeah, I probably should have stopped by now. Oh, and the last part of this is basically checklist as to whether you can determine for yourself if you have parasites or candida or mercury in your body. Some of our environments will introduce this into our systems. Some of the foods we eat will introduce this into our systems. These are just good checklists to kind of keep track. You know, am I having some of these symptoms? Do I need to do a parasite cleanse? Do I need to do a candida cleanse? And most of us who eat a lot of starches will usually have a lot of these symptoms with this candida handout here. Sometimes it's based on drugs, prescription drugs we've taken, other things, other conditions that we have, but it can also be because of the diet that we have. So these are, again, just things for you to use and consider. Same thing with mercury. We talked about fish a minute ago. Some fish, you know, will contain mercury. So there's always these situations where we're introduced to certain things that we have to be mindful of, and then do the things we need to do a cleanse. So we may need to add cilantro or the grain amaranth into our diet if we know that we've taken in some toxic metals through our foods or through the environment. So let me see if I can grab a question or two. Yeah, so if you're doing salt baths, you just wouldn't want to do that if you have high blood pressure. Like if you have high blood pressure or uncontrolled blood pressure, a salt bath is not something you want to do on a regular basis just because you're introducing salt into the body. Yes, and if it's pure aloe, definitely good. We've talked about aloe before. It's a mild laxative. It's healing to the entire gastrointestinal tract. So aloe is good. I do not suggest those aloe drinks that a lot of places are now selling. So pure aloe, yes, is a great option for you. I think the other, okay, these might be about the book. I'm glad you all have an interest in the book. Yes, please, right now it is just through Amazon. Okay, so I don't think I've missed any other questions or comments. So if you need the handout, feel free to email me as always. I'll send it to you. Next week, we'll start this cycle over again. You're always welcome to join, and hopefully there's something new that'll be shared, and you can add on to your information about staying healthy. So until next time, I bid you good health and peace. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
All right. Thank you very much, Nana Akua, for a wonderful lecture. I think we learned a lot from this cycle. And also, I encourage everybody on this call to buy the book and also forward the link to their friends and family. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Yes. Up next, we are going to have Dr. Wright for the Pan-African history.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, welcome, Dr. Wright.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Yes, so this is our last session, I believe, and you'll see me momentarily on camera. Welcome to the Pan-African History and Organizing course for our final session. Give me 1 second to get on camera. You should have seen, though, the document for Amilcar Cabral, okay? And I actually wasn't able to locate Thomas Sankara. I have a book, but I did something that none of you should do, which is loan books. And so I didn't locate that one, but we'll still discuss briefly today. That being said, let me share the document while I'm waiting to get on camera, because I'm just trying to reposition myself. I was traveling a little bit today, so you won't see me just yet, but well, maybe you will. But you have two documents. Let me go right to sharing that. You have two documents that I'm going to discuss today. And one is Amilcar Cabral. Well, both are by Amilcar Cabral, Return to the Source. And I have two essays in that book that I'll be sharing. So we'll focus on those. And then I also want to reference right back to the film that hopefully you all had a chance to watch, which is Cuba and African Odyssey. And it should have given you some perspective on should have given you some perspective on Amilcar Cabral's position. There was a small package in there on his position on basically ethnic diversity and how the struggle for liberation can unify people. Can everybody see that right now? Can you see that, Yvonne?
Yes, we can see that.
Where it says return to the source? Okay, good, perfect. All right, so that's Return to the Source. Amilcar Cabral, we probably saw him notably in the film. Cuba would lend assistance to Guinea-Bissau in the form of armament, or if you could say materials and weapons. But Guinea-Bissau would refuse to have soldiers, Cuban soldiers, participate in their struggle for liberation. And this is very important because every cycle we get the questions about, how are we supposed to practice Pan-Africanism if we've got ethnic conflicts where we are? And, as much as we may think out in the diaspora, everything is so diverse on the African continent, we know that our people are ethnically diverse, right? We are ethnically diverse. We're not homogeneous. We're not all alike. We don't all speak the same languages. We don't all eat the same exact foods, maybe similar, but with different seasoning. we don't have the same, we don't all have the same spiritual practices or traditions. And sometimes it's hard for people to understand that about the African continent, because the assumption is like, well, you're all Black, so you must be the same. And that's not true. Africa is responsible for the world's diversity. And therefore, we are ethnically, culturally, linguistically diverse people. What Amilcar Cabral will talk about in the context of some of his publications and speeches is the fact that in spite of the ethnic diversity, facing white supremacy and culture would be an opportunity to unify. And he talks about it as the struggle preparing the people for the victory, which is why he would say that Cuban soldiers are not to engage in battle against the Portuguese in Guinea-Bissau. Even more, what he's acknowledging in that instance is that for the first time in the history of that part of the world, the people would have to function in concert in order to defeat their colonial oppressors. So let me say it another way. Prior to their liberation struggle in Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, people didn't have colonial borders, right? So people existed in their own ethnic communities. These communities were not conjoined, and Blackness was not a construct, because this is pre-colonial. Colonial brings this concept of race to the forefront, where it did not exist. This is a construct created out of the European mind. This idea of racism and race, constructing groups by physical appearance only, right? And cutting colonial borders within Africa. These borders mean nothing to African people, really. What it would do is it would divide some people who are the same, and it would force people together with other groups of people who they were very much unlike. And so this is a dilemma when, out of the experience of colonialism and its harshness, you have a need to unify. This is probably the first time in the history that people were presented with that situation. So Amilcar Cabral theorizes that for the people of Guinea-Bissau, they would have to fight together in this struggle because it would be a unifying process. They will undergo a process of unification, a process of bonding in their effort to defeat a common oppressor. And so this is very important. And you'll see him talk about this in the National Liberation and Culture. Now, I want to get to another part. So if you read this, this is, in there. But I want you guys to see that there's another document there talking about connecting the struggle, right? An informal talk with Black Americans, where he discusses the similarities of our struggle, both here and on the continent. One of the important features of Amilcar Cabral's position and ideological line is the fact that, unlike many of our continent Marxists and Leninists, so I'll leave there and I'm gonna come on camera. Let me see, maybe you could see me now. Okay, good, yeah. So unlike many of our Marxists and Leninist Pan-Africanists on the continent, what happens is Amilcar Cabral is not a typical Marxist and Leninist. he believes that the struggle is going to prepare the people for the victory, but he also believes that culture and history are going to be important features of liberating oneself. So let me be a little more clear about this. What he is saying, and what the typical Marxist-Leninist line is that you don't need history, you don't need culture in the liberatory process. And this is what's problematic about completely adopting the Marxist-Leninist line, okay? What's problematic about it is the fact that it does not neatly fit or serve the African context, okay? It doesn't serve the African context because it doesn't come out of the African context, right? This Marxist-Leninist line. It does not. It comes out of the Eastern Bloc, Eastern European context, and it doesn't neatly fit the reality of African people because Marx and Lenin were not talking about us. And this is something that a lot of people fail to understand. You can look at other struggles around the world and adopt what is relevant or relates or is beneficial to you. But to just take a staunch position that exists in another region in the world where the oppressed and the oppressors are totally different in terms of that situation, their circumstance, the context, and everything is totally different. And then fitted onto our struggle is problematic at best, sometimes catastrophic at worst. And you can see this with the whole Marxist-Leninist line because, yes, Marx and Lenin are making an assessment of a material struggle, a material assessment analysis, an analysis of labor, the production of labor, the production of materials, all of that, labor. So those things are not problematic. What's problematic is to have a philosophy that says that culture and history are irrelevant to that struggle. For the people theorizing about that, that may be true, okay? When you're all Eastern Europeans and all identifiably white, maybe culture and maybe history are irrelevant. But when you're talking about African people who have undergone the type of colonizing and enslaving processes, which strip us of our language, strip us of our culture, strip us of our historical memory, on and on and on, erase our history and attempt to erase our historical memory, the process of liberation has to include those things, okay? And so Amilcar Cabral is one of the components who says like, no, history is a tool of liberation, okay? Culture is a tool of liberation. And we must invoke these things in the liberatory process. The liberatory process must include us reclaiming our language, reclaiming our culture, and also forging these new relationships in the context of struggle, right? So he's saying all of these things are components, that there shouldn't be a rejection of our history. There shouldn't be a rejection of our culture, our indigenous cultures, in order to reclaim ourselves. Now, that is in addition to understanding that engaging in a collective struggle that is Pan-Africanist in nature also forces us to undergo a process, a historical process, right? For any group of people that has the undertaking of liberating themselves, that struggle is going to be historical for them. It's going to be a historical benchmark. And they are creating a new history together, and that is completely fine. That is also a component that exists for us as African people. There are too many instances of the reality that we are very different, right? Prior to the advent of the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism. The African continent and African people are responsible for the world's diversity. So that in and of itself, meaning the parent people, right? So that in and of itself is enough of a reason to understand that we are very, 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 very diverse, okay? However, I do believe what Shekinah Diop said, and I don't have his book on hand right off the top, but he wrote a book, Shekinah Diop, the great anthropologist and historian from Senegal, who said that there is a cultural unity to Black Africa. Yes, I do believe that there is a common thread that runs through many or most African cultures that one could uncover. However, in addition to that, there's still diversity of language, diversity of religious traditions, right? Spiritual traditions and practices. There are still diversity in terms of specific ethnic mores, right? And values, in addition to that cultural unity or continuity, right? So my point of saying all of this to say is that the lesson in the examination or analysis to make of Amilcar Cabral and his contribution to our struggle as a Pan-Africanist was the understanding that one, and actually there's more, there's one more thing I want to discuss. There's one, understanding that this common struggle, so for us today, the common struggle is not necessarily colonialism, it's neo-colonialism, and it's white supremacy and culture, right? Racism and xenophobia, right? So what we're dealing with is a similar reality. They are the products of colonialism and imperialism, right? Race and racism. And neocolonialism is a product of imperialism and colonialism, right? It's the next phase where we get people who look like us, but do not serve our interests, which is why we have to learn to qualify things. But he is the person who highlights in the context of our struggle that the process that we undergo to liberate ourselves is necessary, and it is going to forge a new bond, a new history for a new people, right? Who will come out on the other side as the owners of their new nation, right? And that's in the context of the African continent. And this is why we can look at continents. We have the high expressions of Pan-Africanism on the African continent because that Milk Ballad, and then Nkrumah and Sekou Touré and others are looking for an opportunity to forge even more or even higher expression of unity, a continental expression of unity, not in an effort to erase the identities of the people, but to have a unified Africa that is to the benefit of African people, right? And yes, address the material situation, okay? And so on and so forth, right? So our situation on the continent is very complex, and it should be, because you're talking about a huge continent with many groups of people. The other point that Amilcar Cabral stresses is the fact that it should be primarily African people who engage in the struggle. Now, this is an interesting point because we often think that our struggle is fighting external forces, where we don't recognize that what you're doing today, what you're engaging, is really part of the struggle, fortifying and establishing unity. And that is harder. it's easy for us to get out and march and resist certain things in larger society. It's harder to build a bridge between people who look like you, but are very culturally different from you, and maybe linguistically different, and maybe, spiritually, may have a different expression of their spirituality. Building those bridges that is actually the struggle. Why? Because in spite of those differences that we might have, we still have a common denominator, which is white supremacy and culture, racism, which decreases all of our life chances. And on the continent of Africa, it's very profound, because you could not see one non-African or Black person in sight, but still white supremacy and culture on a worldwide international level touches each and every African nation. Okay, and exploits the economy, so on and so forth. Okay, and imposes a brain drain, takes the best people in terms of intellectual abilities out of the nation, or make them feel like they can't stay in their own nation in order to help the people there that they've got to leave. And so then it doesn't build the nation, right? So I'm sure you're all familiar with on the African continent, people very often going, the aristocracy going to Europe to get if there's not a doctor in their African country. They are, but they're, part of how white supremacy and culture work is that it extracts those individuals, okay? It exploits those economies, so that the institutions don't exist to build up those professions. And so, very often you will have medical professionals in particular, born and raised in a particular country, get their education, and then leave the country, or leave the country to go finish their education. And only under certain circumstances will they come back and make a significant contribution to the people in the form of their medical services. So this is a big issue. It's not just with Africa. It's many countries around the world. It's called the brain drain. So the point is that there is a common denominator, and this common denominator decreases our life chances. Let me say it another way. It cuts all of our lives short. It shortens all of our lives, whether you're aware of it or you're not aware of it. Okay, so this is why we have to have a conscious effort to struggle against this. Okay, and part of struggling against it is developing yourself ideologically. So we should be thinking at all times, and we have to become conscious of our behavior, conscious of our engagement, conscious of what we do, and conscious what we do in terms of engaging in struggle for unity that is going to protect us from white supremacy and culture. Okay, part of what you all are doing is you're ambassadors in I Love Black People, and your role is to make conscious decisions about establishing what are safe places for us. Now, it might seem like a small thing, like the individual act of naming or identifying those places, but in actuality, it has to do with the preservation of our lives, because any one of the encounters that we have can be deadly if in the wrong space, right? And we all know that. We see that on a regular basis, okay? Here, there, everywhere, okay? So that's a aspect of Emil Cabral's line or ideological position, this idea that we have to forge unity amongst each other, right? That we have to establish a relationship, and through struggle, we do build that relationship, forge those relationships. And then finally, one thing I didn't talk about is the fact that, and it's not in the film, you would have armed militants in a Cabral struggle, or the struggle in Guinea-Bissau, led by the PAIGC. And the reason, so it would be a people struggle, okay? And that's an important characteristic of it, because this people's struggle in Guinea-Bissau would include both women and men as armed militants and revolutionaries. And he highlights generally, you know, that there is an important role for women in the struggle, right? They're not just the hand that rocks the cradle, but they are important players in waging cultural revolution, right? Important figures in terms of reclaiming one's history, right? So in this instance, the hand that rocks the cradle also holds the gun. And he stresses that because the people that would fill the ranks in Guinea-Bissau are the everyday and common people, okay? And likewise, what we can take from that is that it's no particular type of person who is prepared to engage in struggle. It's the person who is willing to engage in ideological development, prepare themselves for the struggle, who is qualified for it, okay? None of what we do or talk about doing is blind, right? That's why we stress in the context of this course, ideological development and consciousness of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and constantly stressing qualifying the product, the end product of any given person or of a system or of an institution in order to identify whether or not it's Pan-Africanist and beneficial to us. So what I'm saying is that a people's struggle includes women, right? It's not just unique to the men. It's not just unique to young men in particular. A people's struggle is inclusive of men and women, okay? And yes, women may have a particular role in transmitting culture, being the initial transmitters or transmitters of culture to children or to young people, right? Because they are the first teachers. So I'm going to leave it there. I don't know, I'll take a few questions, but trying to think if there's anything else. I'll still put this reading. Yvonne, don't lock me out the course too quickly. I still want to put one of Sankara, Thomas Sankar's writings up with regard to women in the struggle. I still want to add that, so I will put that in there. I'm going to try to do it before Monday so she could go ahead and move on, but you'll be able to see it. If you didn't watch Cuba and African Odyssey, please go do that. I was going to show a clip, but I think most of you have watched it already. And so I don't need to revisit it. Let me see what else. And I believe that's it. I mean, I might, yeah, along with posting Thomas Sankar's piece, I may repost the syllabus just so that you can see what you should have gleaned, and you should be able to answer an affirmative in terms of the goals, course objectives, in terms of what you do know or what you learned in the context of this course, okay? So I'm gonna just answer a couple of questions in the chat. Oh, okay. They're in the WhatsApp group, the documents. So if you're officially in the course, which group on WhatsApp are you sharing? We have a WhatsApp group, the Pan-African History and Organizing course. The same place. Hold on, let me make sure. Yeah, 21A. So you guys are in the Pan-African History and Organizing course. You should see the last documents. Okay, so if you're trying to be added, then that means you're not officially in the course. So you might want to be added to this new cycle. So you are in the course from start to finish and get everything, okay? Peter, And the only reason why I'm calling you Peter is because I don't even have my glasses on this time around. So I can't actually even see the rest of your name, but okay. As a public health student, I'm joining the lectures. Oh, great. Osei, thanks Nana for excellent presentation. Okay, that was Peter too. All right, so it doesn't look like there's much. All right, all the questions seem to be for Nana Kua. Yes, yeah, so the administrator is gonna add you, I guess either Award or Yvonne, right? So you'll get information. Let them know what they need to share. So see Emmanuel and Peter. Okay, so I don't see any particular questions that you have this week. So it's been a pleasure. I hope you got something from the course. I'll just give you a little checklist to go over before the course closes. And you can see whether or not you can answer in the affirmative. Not a test. I don't want to make it seem like a test, not a test. It's just to say, hey, I definitely learned this in the course and this contributed to my overall knowledge on the topic. And, you know, the idea is that this is an ideological development and training course so that you can get to the stage where not only do you understand what you're doing, but you understand why you're doing it and who you are doing it or whom you are doing what you're doing for, right? So that's the objective, right? In revisiting the course outcomes or the objectives, the course objectives. Okay, so it's been my pleasure. I don't think I have any more questions. And I appreciate it. I appreciate you dedicating your time to developing yourself ideologically in order to do the work that you do for I Love Black People and loving our people through action, okay? I see one more question, but I don't think it's for me. Thanks for the explanation. Thank you very much, Peter. Okay. And I hope you all have a good weekend. Stay safe. It's the new year. So the new year is always interesting. On this Christian calendar, it's the new year, but it's not probably the new year in other cultures. We can respect that. So it's, you know, the beginning of the year on the Christian calendar, although we may not all be Christians. And so, you know, there's always a lot going on. So stay safe. Okay. I am because we are.
I am because we are. Thank you so much, Dr. Right, we want to
thank you.
We appreciate you. Thank you all for staying with us and also until the end of this lecture. See you again next week as we learn more from Dr. Tyrone Wright about the Pan-African History and Organizing class. And also a quick update to those who are in Malawi. Kindly stay safe. I hear there is a severe outbreak of cholera. So let's stay safe, and I hear that more than 750 deaths so far. So we hope you are safe, family, and let's practice safe measures which the government told you to do. So we appreciate for you for the support, love, and stay blessed. Enjoy the rest of the week. Yes, Brother Amazing Grace, stay safe. I know you are there in Malawi, and I hear that there's a serious outbreak of cholera. We hope you will be safe, your family and everyone. Spread the news so that everyone practice safe measures. Thank you all. I am because we are Ubuntu.